All right. Well, hello, everybody. We're super excited to have you here today. My name is Sean Blum. I'm one of the partners here at Woltman Group, and I do a lot of different types of services, nonprofit work, and also a lot of for-profit business and accounting and 1040 work. So the Woltman Group, if you don't know, I know we have a number of clients on today, but we also have some that aren't clients. And we're excited. We're just excited to have you here. This is a big opportunity, and we're excited to provide this webinar today. So we do a full range of services for the traditional tax and accounting. We do a fair amount of nonprofit work, and we also have a lot of advisory consulting type services that we do. Our core focus here at the firm is we want to enhance our community through insightful accounting and advisory relationships. So we just want to better the community. And this is this webinar today is one way that we feel we can do that. So we're on to update you on just with today's environment. Cindy's going to help you with some things, tips and tactics. How do you talk to your stakeholders, people that are interested in your organization? If you're interested in learning more about us as a firm, you can visit our website, woltmangroup.com, or our phone number is 361-1200. We'd love to visit with you and help. But let's move on to why you're here today. So Cindy Peterson is our presenter. I've known Cindy for a long time. I was trying to count the years. It's 15 plus, maybe 20. It's probably close to 20 or 15, I think, because we've been married 15 years and a couple of years after that. So I met Cindy through my wife as they worked together at the United Way. Cindy was doing the campaign, and my wife was doing the spending side of the campaign, and also campaign. Everybody at United Way gets to do that. But then Cindy went off on her own, and she's an expert in what she's going to talk to you about today, and just consulting and coaching nonprofit clients. I've referred some of my clients to her because I know that she does a great job with them, helps them. We've just known Cindy for a long time, so I have a lot of trust in letting you visit with her, and she can help you. And my wife we've known her just for just other things too, and I think they broke their foot. Each of them broke their foot at one point, and different things, and just lots of crazy stories of things that we've done and gotten to know each other. But Cindy is a certified fundraising executive who's has earned a certification in capital campaign fundraising through the Institute of Charitable Giving, and she has a master's in social work from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And recently, Cindy was named one of their top 25 women in business by the Prairie Business Magazine. So welcome, Cindy. We're excited to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sean, and everyone. So glad to be here. I echo the sentiments that we're so glad that we can spend some time together today and talk about messaging into the new year. That's where we are. We're into a new year, 2021, and here we are fundraising a little bit more. I want to, of course, thank Sean and the Woltman Group for creating this opportunity for me. Some of the themes that Maximizing Excellence is educate and to elevate, and this is a chance to be able to do a little bit of both. And yes, Sean and his family and my family go way back, but the group has also taken very, very good care of me, my husband, our family, and maximizing excellence. And so it's a great chance to work together and to share with everyone on the call today. And Dave's going to be our guy who makes sure that any questions and information gets sent our way. So a big shout out to Dave. Thanks for being a part of this today too and setting it up. And since you've had a chance to hear a little bit about me, before we dive into content, I want to tell you a little bit about Maximizing Excellence for those who might not know. Our mission is to partner with organizations that want to improve their effectiveness and achieve high impact. And while the majority of what we do takes place in Sioux Falls, Maximizing Excellence actually works with organizations across South Dakota, along with what I would say is about a 2-hour radius of Sioux Falls, which might include Sioux City, Marshall, Minnesota, Omaha, and a lot of great communities in between. And while I'm not going to read it, you can see the philosophy that we've adopted and carry forward with all of our work at Maximizing Excellence. And why I think it's important to point that out is because you're going to hear and see that philosophy throughout today's presentation. And here we go to the presentation. My goal is to provide clarity around how your mission matters when it comes to messaging. How do you ensure that you remember a person's why when it comes to his or her decision to give? And how are you using those motivations alongside your mission to reframe your fundraising messaging to invoke what's so critically important, a sense of urgency? With whatever remaining time we have, that time is all yours. We'll do an Ask Me Anything segment to ensure that you leave with what you came for. Each of you came on today because you were looking for something. You were wanting some piece of information, some element of advice, some spark. Be sure that you leave with that today. And really, that brings us to expectations. You'll find, if you haven't already, my approach is pretty informal. I've got 20 plus years of knowledge and experience around fundraising, but I also recognize that each and every one of you come into this call with experience and knowledge in fundraising. So be sure to include that and incorporate that into our conversation today. I'm also very, very aware that there are a lot of different ways to approach fundraising and to approach this topic of messaging. Today's about the maximizing excellence way. Now, we're all getting pretty comfortable with Zoom. We've probably had a lot of, I don't even know if I can count the number of Zoom calls I've had or presentations or conversations in the last 9 months. And I recognize that Zoom isn't necessarily the most interactive format. However, I want this to be interactive. I want you to participate in today's conversation and look at it as much as a conversation as you can. So I'm going to ask you actually to jump in from the get-go with the next slide. And so I encourage you to utilize the chat box to ask questions or share comments. Like I said, Dave's going to keep me on top of that. I can't see the chat box right now, so Dave will jump in when there's something to share or a piece to bring into the conversation. And you know as well as I do, listening to a 45-minute conversation, presentation, only brings so much value as what you apply and how you apply it. So I encourage you to leave today's call with at least one authentic action item that you can take back to help you move your organization and your fundraising forward. So with that, we're going to jump in. And like I said, we're going to do the interactive part right away. And we are going to talk about fundamentals for a moment, because how you approach your fundraising message correlates directly to your perspective on fundraising at its core, at that fundamental level. And I've long believed that the mentality around these 4 fundamental topics that we're going to speak to in just a moment, that's the right place to frame your approach to raising money. And so we're going to put Dave to work right away. We're going to put all of you to work right away. I'm going to ask that when I ask my question, that you offer true or false in the chat box. And we'll give you about 20 seconds for everybody to jump in and be able to do that. And then Dave, I'll ask you to kind of let me know what the sentiment is with this particular question. First one, right out the get-go. Fundraising is about raising money. True or false? We're seeing a few come through. A couple more comments. Dave, what's the consensus? True or false? Fundraising is about raising money.
Looks like the majority are saying false, Cindy.
Well, I think that's a good answer. I too would say false. I believe that fundraising, like right in my philosophy, is that byproduct. Good fundraising is about building relationships and partnerships. It's about cultivating champions. It's about establishing trust and proving the value and showing the value of your organization. It's about making sure current potential donors know how their investment, and I use that word very intentionally, investment, how their investment is making a difference. Next one, true or false? Organizations are entitled to community support. They're nonprofits after all. True or false? Organizations are entitled to community support. See a couple of those coming through, a couple more. Dave, where did we land? True or false? Organizations are entitled to community support.
Looks like most everybody is saying false.
Well, and I would agree with that. No one is obligated to support your group. It doesn't matter what you've done for them. It doesn't matter how wealthy they are. It doesn't matter how much they give to other groups, how close of a friend they are to you or to someone on your team, or any other circumstance that might make them a likely giver. The truth is, people say no to giving for all sorts of reasons. And some of those may have nothing to do with your organization, and some might. Most often people say no because they have other priorities, or they don't actually understand what your organization does or what you're asking them to invest in. Sometimes we hear no when that person is really saying, I need more time to decide, or I just need more information. So your job is really to respond accordingly. And if they do say no, of course, be gracious, be appreciative. What I've experienced in 20 plus years of fundraising is that if the person who says no in any way, shape, or form feels badly because they said no, they're not going to want to be around you or your organization. So be as gracious and appreciative as possible. People are drawn to other people who make them feel really good. So if you can make someone feel really good and make it really okay to say no, you're keeping that door open for that future yes. Because oftentimes it's about it being the right time. And a no today might be a yes 6 months from now. So let's jump into the third one. I love this one. People give because organizations have needs. I'm a social worker. We talk about needs all the time. People give because organizations have needs. True or false? Right at that fundamental level, Dave, where are people at? True or false?
Mostly all false.
Mostly all false. A philosophy that I've carried forward, and I will probably say 5 times while we're all hanging out today, is that people have needs. The clients you serve have needs. Organizations have solutions. People have needs. Organizations have solutions. Organizations provide resources. They provide support. Organizations solve problems. And why is this important? Because when you're going in and asking someone or a company or group to invest in your organization, you cannot go in there talking about your needs. We need new computers and technology. We need another weekend staff person. It's not about you and what you need. It's about your solutions. That's what you talk about. Is your organization doing inventive work in the face of COVID-19? It's about sharing that with your supporters. So consider the idea that people are investing in your organization to do work that they themselves cannot do alone. And if you're doing good work that meets an identified need using a proven solution that you can ideally measure, then you're really positioned to ask others to invest in that work. So organizations have solutions, people have needs. And let's jump into that last one. People give when they feel inspired. True or false? Dave, what kind of responses are we seeing for this one?
Looks like we've got unanimous true.
This one is also false. As simple as it is, people give because they were asked. Absolutely feeling inspired is an important part of saying yes, but people give because they were asked. And a great example of this I have is, I was actually just talking to Sean about my daughter, Maddie. She is a first-time Girl Scout. And I've been talking with the Girl Scouts a little bit about their fundraising, and they wish that their alumni would give to their organization more. Because who understands Girl Scouts and its impact and the mission more than alumni? But yet they have almost zero alumni giving. And it's not because those alumni aren't inspired. It's because they haven't been asked. So the reason why people give is because they're asked. And it's not as simple as someone just believing in your cause and asking how they can help. So you're really responsible for educating those potential donors, and just as importantly, making that link and asking them to give in a specific way, and asking them to give in a way that's meaningful to them. And it might not necessarily be the easiest way for you. So right there with those fundraising mentality, we're going to take that to the next side and talk about donor motivations. Understanding what motivates a person to give is absolutely critical for asking for a gift. The statistics on the screen, they come from a survey that was done from the U.S. Trust study of high net worth. They asked individuals to indicate when and how they give to the following scenarios, and there were 20 plus. Right at the top, hopefully no surprise, nearly every single one of those donors report that they give because they believe in the mission of the organization. And as simple as that sounds, and they'll take that back to that fundamental, this is where you and your organization should start and end every relationship and every conversation with a donor. The next one right there, donors cite that they make a gift because they see that the organization's making a difference. This is about impact. If you can measure your impact and articulate it to your donors, that evokes trust and increases their likelihood to give. Just as importantly, think about this one. More than 90% of donors acknowledge they support the same organizations and causes year after year. Some say that this is about habit, or just, we're creatures of habits, we just do that year after year, but really it's about loyalty. Giving year after year is connected to that organization in terms of loyalty, and that's motivated by mission, and it's motivated by stewardship. Now, on the flip side, this almost seems counterintuitive. 83.5% say that they give spontaneously in response to a need. This is why disaster relief efforts, they draw so much support right there at that moment. This is why GoFundMe pages are working in the social media environment. There's a sense of urgency, and you're going to hear that word throughout our time today. There's a sense of urgency driven by the ask that a potential donor responds to. COVID has even fit into this in some ways when it comes to fundraising and giving. There's that sense of urgency that's driven by the ask, and people respond to that and give. From there, the next one that I've offered is to remedy issues that are affected by those or those close to you. This is a very emotionally driven reason. And I would say most organizations that I'm familiar with, certainly many that I work with, this is the motivator that they lead with. This is the motivator that in some cases is the motivator and maybe the only motivator that they are incorporating into their conversations and their asks with donors. It's very effective, of course, and it's certainly effective when you might be inviting others to give in a peer-to-peer situation. But what I would point out to you is that there were more individuals motivated to give because of demonstrated impact versus that emotional connection. So while most organizations are leading with that emotional connection, incorporating the impact piece, kind of the head and the heart of the conversation, is really, really important. Now, I'd be awfully surprised if everything I just shared was new to the folks on this call. No doubt that there's elements of that information that were points of review and hopefully in a lot of ways points of reinforcement. But we start there because the fundamentals do not mean much. They don't mean much at all unless you apply them to your fundraising efforts. You know that stuff. Are you incorporating it into your fundraising strategy and into your fundraising ask? And on the flip side, if your fundraising efforts are falling short, they just aren't going to be as effective if you don't have a strong understanding of those fundamentals. So they really do work in tandem. Now, if you haven't yet, I got a formula on the screen right there. If you haven't yet, write this formula down. Mentality plus motivators plus message. Your formula for raising funds, especially when you're looking to what I call raising real dollars right now, that is found at the intersection of your fundraising mentality and what motivates donors to act. And so as we dive into that fundraising element with the mentality, start thinking, take these elements, and I encourage you to start thinking about how this translates into the message that you put together for your donors. Because successful fundraising has never been about you. So it's not, now is not the time to default to that. And as much as it might feel like COVID-19 or perhaps any other crisis that's happening at your organization right now, that it's happening to you or happening to your organization, the true reality is that environment is happening to those you serve. So again, we bring it back to mission. Stay focused on your mission and stay focused on the why your organization exists. And then you start framing conversations accordingly. Even think about informal conversations, maybe with your staff. How are you intentionally but informally resetting your team's mindset with the language that you're using in terms of needs, in terms of solutions, and in terms of mission? How are you guiding and inspiring your board's mindset with the language that you're choosing to use? Because if you believe in your organization's mission, and if your staff and your board believe in your organization's mission, then use that to sustain the energy and focus you need to ensure that that mission exists tomorrow. Because that's really what it's all about. It's sometimes we just need to bring people back to that element and lead from it and lead with it. And honestly, while the realities of 2020 have had troubling impacts on fundraising, you've no doubt followed where some nonprofits have raised more money in 2020 than they've ever raised before. And most of those organizations have a connection meeting basic needs. And if your organization is not one of those, seeing that can be really discouraging, because those that are doing very, very well are getting a lot of attention in the media locally, a lot of promotion, a lot of visibility for doing really well. And that can be awfully discouraging if you're on the other side of that and you aren't having the same kind of results. And while you might be discouraged, I would say and encourage you, do not apologize for having a mission that doesn't feed people or doesn't house people or doesn't clothe people. That's just not what you do. But your mission is important. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be doing it year after year. Your organization would not exist year after year. So what I would encourage you to do, and what I've even done, is pause. Recognize where your mission does fit into that hierarchy of needs. If your mission isn't tied to basic needs, think about where and how it might support basic needs. If we know people are responding to organizations that are providing basic needs, how does your organization support basic needs? How does it tie to economic development? How does it tie to sustainability? Or maybe your mission is more quality of life focused. Articulate the importance of having a quality of life. How does quality of life affect the whole person, such as their mental health? And a great example of this that I've actually lived as a volunteer is with Levitt at the Falls. If folks on the call are familiar with Levitt at the Falls here in Sioux Falls, Levitt has a mission: build community through music. I happen to serve on the board. And as you can imagine, this spring we were set for 50 free concerts, 50 free outdoor concerts this past summer. And I remember this meeting so well. With all the unknowns that everyone else was facing, deciding if we would have concerts on the lawn. Would we maybe try to have 10? What would we tell our sponsors? What would we tell our supporters who've been sponsoring concerts if there's no concerts? As a board, we talked at length about the importance of the mission, building community through music, and in what other ways can we creatively carry forward that mission? How can this organization live that mission? And that motivated us as a board. So I'm kind of sharing this from you from the lens of the board member. If this was a conversation that you were to facilitate or lift up down the road or in the coming weeks or months, as a board member, lifting that conversation about mission motivated us, and it reminded us where to really focus. So then we put together our plan. We created Levitt at the living room, Levitt in your neighborhood. How can we bring and carry on community through music? And those initiatives actually ended up being so successful. We're going to continue versions of them in 2021, even when we're back on the lawn. We would have never looked at it like that. We only were thinking about the concerts, but the concerts were the vehicle for the mission. If we hadn't focused on mission and where and why Levitt is important, I don't know if we would have solved that problem. From there, we started talking to concert sponsors, and the conversation again focused on the mission pivot and how their contribution would be used, even though there wasn't a concert to sponsor. Many folks, many of these businesses, many of these donors, they were fine with it. They even said, well, count me in for next year too. When we're back on the lawn, we want to be a sponsor. We want to be a part of this, but yes, use our dollars to carry forward your mission now. In some cases, some folks did ask to carry their sponsorship over to the next year, but we actually did not lose a single sponsor or donor through this conversation and through this strategy. Again, that mission absolutely prevailed. Then as we take that piece of the formula and combine it with motivators, there's so many measured, proven motivators that are tied to donor decisions. They're timeless, right? So even though the fundraising world looks different than it did a year ago, most of those fundamental motivators hold true, but they really take on a new twist. So when you need right now dollars, not all motivators are the same. The donor motivators best suited for leveraging a response to an immediate need are the ones that are here, and they're a lot of the ones that I was highlighting earlier. These are leveraged to respond again to that immediate need. And the other important thing to think about when you're looking at these motivators and building your messaging is your messaging is just as much about who you're talking to as it is what you're saying. And these motivators all point to your target audience when you're raising real right now dollars. And those are your most loyal partners, your existing donors, your current board members, and actually your past board members. That's a really special group to be thinking about right now. Now, the hard part of that reality is that it makes your target audience pretty narrow. What's hard is that this isn't the best time to be building a lot of new relationships. Developing new messaging in the new year requires a commitment. And the word that I'll lift up is reuniting, a commitment to reuniting with those who know your mission best and already love your mission the most. This is when you strategize with laser focus versus an approach that aims to engage a lot of folks in a lot of new ways. The strategy requires revisiting how you speak to each of these four motivators in all of your conversations. So even if it's a newsletter that goes out to 4,000 people, whether it's at a board meeting, you're on a Zoom call, focus what you say on these four motivators, thinking about that specific target audience of your most loyal donors, those past and present board members as well. And that's going to help elevate your motivators for one audience. And so that takes us really to that next piece of the formula with messaging. You know who you're going to talk to, you've got a good sense of what motivates them. So what is it that we want to say when we have that time to talk? And before I jump into this, Dave, have any questions or anything I need to pause on? Are we good? Or if anybody's got a quick question, I'll take it now.
Yeah, there was one, Cindy. How do I ask someone to give when I don't know if or how COVID has affected them?
I imagine that everybody on this call has wondered that, whether they've said it out loud or not. What I will tell you is that if they are connected to your mission, they will welcome the invitation, and that word will come up again, to be a part of what you're doing. It's less about whether they have or haven't been impacted. It's about keeping them connected to your mission. And what I found, just like some nonprofits are doing very, very well, some businesses are doing very, very well, some individuals are doing very well. But what I've learned through doing some interviews, some feasibility studies, is that COVID does not lead donor decisions right now. I can think of more than 80 interviews that our company has done in the last 4 months. And the consensus is that people do not lead with COVID when it comes to their philanthropic decision-making. So hopefully folks can hang on to that as they start building their own confidence to go in and take that message and make those asks. Well, let's jump in with those message components then. First and foremost, start with education. Even your most loyal supporters, they quite likely don't know the extent to which COVID has maybe wreaked havoc on your day-to-day. But it's not a woe is me conversation. It really takes a few minutes to ask yourself, how is it impacting those you serve? Have you really been able to dial down and articulate how it's impacting those you serve? Are you by chance serving more people? Meals on Wheels is. Are you serving fewer? Youth centers are. Has it complicated the needs of those you serve? Ask families in childcare. Has it complicated the way that you meet needs? I can't imagine there's an organization that it hasn't. So answer those questions by telling a story. Not only from a big picture perspective, but if possible, how can you drill that down and tell a story of an individual or family who embodies the reality of those you've served and now how you serve them? And as you're having that conversation, as your most loyal donors are digesting the realities of the need, you have your opportunity to elevate how your mission and the work you're doing is part of the solution. That's a great place for that to fit in right there. And it's important to be really specific. Know what it's going to take to meet the evolved need. Be able to articulate what it has taken to be able to meet the evolved need over the past few months. You're the expert on the solutions to the needs that those you serve have. And those that you're visiting with want to know what that expertise can tell. Tell your donors about your plan, know what it's going to cost. Maybe you've had a chance to measure some impact. But an audience that I hope that you do not overlook are past board members. Even if you're newer to your organization and you might not know all of your past board members, they have all been in the room when hard decisions have been made before. They are going to appreciate, and in some ways, maybe, I don't know if the word's enjoy, but they will most certainly appreciate that you've shared a glimpse of it with them. Because again, they've been there. They might tell a story of their experience making a tough decision for that organization. They want to be a part of the solution. And just as importantly, they want to know what happens if nothing happens. And for those of you who don't have quite as direct of a connection to maybe Meals on Wheels or homeless shelter, to those basic needs, acknowledge and be able to really share how your mission does fit in when you're connecting with your supporters. We talked about that a little bit earlier, for being able to really know that in terms of how you're putting those pieces together. But when you're having those conversations, whether you're talking about basic needs or quality of life or something else, keep that conversation focused on right now. When we come to the other side of this, when we get past this particular piece, that angle, that is not resonating. It is not resonating for 2021. Everyone is thinking about right now. That's part of like a crisis mentality. How are we reacting and responding? And frankly, looking ahead doesn't necessarily bring optimism to everyone that you're visiting with. So don't fight that. Use it. Be about right now. And talking about the right now evokes that sense of urgency that you need to use as a motivator that just doesn't come when you're having them think too far ahead with you. And that might seem a little counterproductive or counterintuitive even, but right now is the particular motivator, that spontaneity in response to an emerging need. That is the motivator that seems to be carrying donations right now more than any other motivator, because not all motivators are the same in the environment that we're in. And of course, don't apologize for not feeding people with your mission. Remind them what value your organization has contributed in the past and how you're meeting and fulfilling an important need right now. Remind those loyal donors why they support you. The formula isn't complicated, and it's certainly not complete without the result, that call to action, because they might be inspired by connecting that fundraising mentality with what motivates them to give. And you may have really connected with them through the message that you've told. But now you must absolutely ask. And I formed that ask as an invitation. Your ask might need to look different in the current condition. And if you're nervous about it being an appropriate time to ask, or you're worried about how many other organizations have been asking them to support, or what their current situation or their business climate is, it's simply an invitation. You're inviting your most loyal donors to be part of your right now solution. That invitation, that influences their mentality, it taps into their motivators, and it brings them into your organization in a very special, a very collaborative way. So when you're thinking about the formula, how is your mentality influencing your fundraising approach? And does there need to be a shift? Is it focused on mission? Is it focused on solutions? Your team, are they there with you? Your board, are they in the place to have that mission-oriented mentality? Because mission is going to prevail. It just always has, and it always will. And then how do you take that mentality that you've got to own and carry into your conversation and connect that with what motivates donors most? And right now, those motivators really are driven by urgency. They want to see their impact go to work right now. You need them to be a part of your solution right now. And that's how you talk about it when you're putting that messaging together and putting those pieces together, focusing on solution, focusing on how COVID and other situations are affecting those you serve, and really inviting them into that right now solution. Thinking about how you bring them together again in a very special, a very collaborative way. But you absolutely must ask. You must ask. You've got to be very clear. You've got to be very specific. But don't skip inviting them in. When we look at our time together today, it's really about walking you through the formula and getting those elements in place for you. And so in speaking of asking, I'm asking each of you, inviting each of you to ask me anything. It could be about the formula. It could be about a particular motivator. It could have absolutely nothing to do with what I just talked about, but you want to pick my brain because you've got access to it with something else when it comes to fundraising. So what is it that you want to know?
Well, Dave's gathering those, Cindy. I have one for you.
Okay. Uh-oh. All right, I'm ready.
What have you seen any like interesting or new ideas about how people are connecting as far as connecting with their donors or getting their message out to people? I mean, Zoom has been obviously used a lot more, and there's some people like it, some people maybe aren't. Most people are able to use it, it seems, even if they're in the not as tech savvy bucket.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any other or things on top of that you've seen, or any ideas you have for that as far as
Yeah, I think there's a few, and and a lot of times people are kind of going back to the basics a little bit, Sean. Nostalgia. And that ties a little bit back into those board members and those key donors. But executive directors, development directors, fundraising folks, they are really trying to bring their donors back to a special memory or a special moment of time in that organization, if that makes sense. Sure. And so, for example, I have seen more organization, and again, we're at the new year, not Christmas cards, Christmas ornaments. Organizations sent their donors, their volunteers, Christmas ornaments that had their logo on it. I have seen more handwritten thank yous, and not just thank yous, just handwritten notes. Speaking to a memory, speaking to a better time, because a lot of folks are at home. And so how do we get to them, and how do we connect with them above and beyond this Zoom? And so that thinking about nostalgia and bringing them back to that memory and connecting them back to a special moment with the organization really seems to have some holding power and really resonate. And I just even thinking about it makes me smile, and a smile is worth something these days.
Yeah, I think what you make people feel good. I mean, be somebody that you want to be around. I mean, I think that's really important, because you're building that connection, that social interaction, and people are just desiring interaction with people, I think, right now, because it's been
You're
so
absolutely.
limited. They get a chance to talk to somebody, it means something.
Well, and the conversations don't have to be about fundraising. They don't even always have to be about the organization. If you go back to that first fundamental, fundraising isn't always about fundraising. It's about relationships and connections. Folks get, executive directors, fundraising team members, you can just call and check in. And it actually is really resonating. People are finding it to be authentic on the other side of that conversation.
Yeah, that speaks to them, and will encourage them to want to be involved in your organization. So,
but then if you go back, so tie that again with that concept of right or wrong, or whether we wish it was a different way. Your target audience, or anyone's target audience in fundraising, and maybe even when you think of your clients, it's about the ones that you have now. How can you really have that authentic conversation with someone that you've met for a few moments, and then bring them in that quickly without having those pieces? So that's why really focusing on the relationships that exist, or bringing back relationships that maybe you can reconnect with and re-engage. That's, I think, where it's really resonating with that nostalgia again, and that authenticity.
sure. I think I saw a few more go into the chat. Dave, did you want to share some of those?
Yeah, sure. Terry's asking, on the hierarchy of needs, does it matter much where you land? Or does it matter much, or have you noticed donors are willing to give more to certain causes that are at a certain level of the pyramid? And also asking if you could quickly review that pyramid.
Oh, that means I've got to have the pyramid memorized. Okay. Does it matter where you are? It doesn't matter where you are in terms of, does your mission matters? It matters where you are in terms of how you talk about your mission. So, and maybe someone knows better than I do, the beginning or the basis of Maslow's hierarchy need talks about basic needs: food, water, shelter. And then as you move up, you're talking about more evolved needs. And so about that third, fourth later, you start talking about meaningful relationships, and start talking about more of those internal and less tangible needs, until you get all the way to the top of self-actualization. And what I have found is quality of life really resonates at every single level, and how you bring quality of life into, Sean even spoke to just now, thinking about people just are craving interaction and connections, and that mental health, that mental well-being really resonates with quality of life. And if your work is in economic development, well, we need that happening in our community, so that families can have more confidence and feel less reactive to their life, being held into some of those lower level basic needs. So unfortunately, I do not have the pyramid memorized at this moment. I'm sure when I get off this call, I could probably rattle it all off. But conceptually, it's more those more basic, tangible needs. And then as you move up, go there. But wherever you are, you exist for a reason, and you just need to connect it. And if I'm missing a piece, or if you've got a follow-up question, I'll sure take it.
Yeah, the list is physiological on the bottom, safety next, belongingness and love needs, esteem needs, and then self-actualization. So yeah, I think you got it right there. So yeah, you definitely find the folks that have been sheltered more, especially maybe the older generation have been sheltered a little more. They just are really thirst for even a phone call. I mean, just the chance to visit with somebody that's alive, and maybe not their spouse or whoever's just living in their house. They get a chance to visit with someone outside the home. So.
And Terry had a follow-up, just asking, how does this approach change, if at all, if you're a startup nonprofit, no past board members, and all of your donors are first-time donors, so you haven't had a chance to establish a loyalty yet?
Terry, first of all, I empathize with the situation. And when you think about new businesses, they are having versions of these same conversations. And the truth is, it's just going to be harder. So what I would do and what I would recommend is having that conversation with your board members and asking each of them to identify a relationship and a long-standing connection and to bring you in. So you're really leveraging the trust transfer. And, and you might be thinking, Terry, well, gosh, we've had this conversation with our board before. We ask them to introduce us to people, but even reframing that, say, you are the lifeline to resources in our organization. You are absolutely the lifeline. And if this mission, how do we bring people in to that? And I think that's, unfortunately, your list is shorter than everyone else's, but I think that's an important tool and leverage to have. And we can sure talk a little bit more about it if you want, because you're in a tough spot, as are a lot of other new organizations. So, and keeping the energy up, keeping the enthusiasm up, keeping the optimism up, and reminding people what you're doing, and taking those testimonials of those folks that you've helped so quickly. Look how new we are. Look how many people we've helped. That level of inspiration can really drive somebody getting involved.
So Terry's also asking, where and how does the amount of the ask come into play?
The process is the same no matter how much you're asking for. The ask is when a lot of times people wonder, now, should we ask for a specific amount? Do we just say what you can do? What I like to do is I like to connect the dollar amount to something that's happening in the organization, whether it's a gift so if I'm visiting with a potential donor and I've got an idea of how much I think they should give or could give, or what I know they do in Heart Club, because all of that stuff's public and you can read it. I try to take the dollar amount that I'm targeting and I tie it to something. So for example, this is a big ask, but Bridging the Gap has a program, Leaders of Tomorrow, and it's $25,000. And so if I'm sitting across from somebody and I'll say a $25,000 investment covers the entire cohort. So that gives you a chance to see the direct impact. $1,000 gift will provide 7, maybe 17 counseling sessions, or we're able to provide our an X number of meals with a dollar amount. So connect the dollar amount to what that dollar will do, more so than to that individual. If you're not comfortable, if you are comfortable, you just ask for it.
Angie's asking, she says, all of our staff raise funds for our nonprofit. Do you have any recommendations to help those who feel this is intimidating, beyond that they just believe in the mission? Or do you have stories of impact to share getting beyond that ask portion?
Yeah, everybody approaches fundraising a little bit differently, but what I believe is that there's a fundraiser in every single person, and it's about connecting to that story. And what might make sense, depending on the size of the group, is just for the group to talk about it, to talk about where their comfort is and isn't, and how somebody around that table, because you're all in it together, is, so, well, here's how I handle that, or I feel that way too. I also really believe in the buddy system. Actually, on Zoom calls, those are more effective when you're making an ask if there's 3 people on the call than if there's 2. And so if you've got somebody who can really complement, maybe they've got the story, but they don't feel really comfortable making that actual ask at the end, and perhaps you are more comfortable making the ask, but you just really don't have a feel of all the numbers and the warm and fuzzy piece, you go in together and you each can cover those different elements. And it also just is more conversation, rather than feeling like it's this almost like interview type. You're able to have some conversation. So you've kind of got to meet them where they're at, and they've got to say out loud what they're uncomfortable with and why, so that you can actually respond and try to give them the tools that they need. But if it's not clear the why they're uncomfortable, then it's going to be tough. But I would really go with that buddy ask.
Yeah, I think that's important. There was another, So when you're asking about if you have an amount, are you being specific? Are you kind of let them land where they land, or what's your thoughts there when you're going into that kind of a meeting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and we get stuck there. I think sometimes that's where we get stuck in, so, there's so many phases of an ask. So identifying where you get stuck. If you're stuck at what do I ask for and how much I ask for, there are different schools of thought. Remember in the beginning, I said there's a lot of ways to do things. This is the maximizing excellence way. I believe you go in with a dollar amount and that you're very specific about what that dollar amount does. And any gift to our organization, we will put to work right away. Today, I'm asking you to consider a $1,500 gift because I know those $1,500 will provide X, Y, and Z, and they'll start to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. When you're doing, you said maybe a couple of people, are there specific members in the organization that are going to help be more effective with some of those meetings necessarily? Or I know that you've talked about on other things we've worked with, the importance of the board members to be involved in the asking or at least the presentation, or somehow they're bringing the person to what's the role of that, you think, as far as success that you see?
How board members fit into fundraising. Again, not everyone agrees with my approach. This is what I believe and what I've seen to be most effective and where I've seen board members feel most honored in their board member role. Having a board member participate in a call, even if they don't know that person, they still bring value because they talk about it more from a peer-to-peer lens. But I do not ask my board members to make an ask. I want them to participate. I want them to talk about why they're involved. Maybe, my wife and I, or my husband and I, have been giving to this organization for the past 5 years, and we will continue to give because we see our dollars go to work. And I wanted to introduce you and Sarah to one another because I think this might make sense for you. That's a lot to ask of a board member. If they said something like that, even stumbly, it's the staff person's job to close that deal and make that ask.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an appropriate role for a board member. I think if you have like a young energy, they haven't had time to get nervous about asking for money. Honestly, that's how I got suckered into it when I was 21 years ago. Like, I have to raise money. Yeah, just tell them about your program and tell them why it's exciting. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, oh, and then the person standing next to me finished it and did the ask at the end. I didn't know that's what was going on. Who's that person in your office? Or who's your board member like that?
Yeah.
Who's got the enthusiasm that you can really complement your strengths with that? And you can really get a nice response from that, but really recognizing that if you are the fundraising staff person, if you are the executive director, it is your job to make the ask at the end.
Sure. I think, what you're saying is people are really just sharing their story. Like, this is why I care about this organization that I'm involved in. This is the impact we've seen, the impact it's had on our lives. That's not hard for people to do because there's a reason they're involved and they like that. So I think that I like what you're saying there. I think that's going to be helpful for people, and it just helps them. And I also think, some of the people that are having to do the ask get so focused on the result instead of just the activity. You can't control what people do. You can control how you present yourself, how you present the organization. If they choose not to follow, you just can't. You just have to do what you can to make that activity and make that ask.
Well, Sean, you absolutely get to come work here if you ever decide not to be a CPA anymore. You get it. And hopefully others are hearing that sentiment as well. And I go back to that philosophy. Fundraising in and of itself doesn't raise money. Fundraising is a byproduct of having a powerful mission, inviting people into that story and showing the impact of what that gift does. Mm-hmm. The rest is up to the donor. Mm-hmm. And if they say no, that's okay, as long as you feel good about the way you told the story.
Mm-hmm. I think there's another question, Dave. Do you want to ask that one?
Yeah. Emily's asking, what are your thoughts on long-term legacy and or bequest type gifts in 2021 as we're continuing to live in uncertain times?
Is it going out and seeking them and targeting them?
That's a great question.
We'll have to wait for Emily to ask, maybe clarify a little more.
It's worth waiting for. I could just ramble on that topic for a while.
Emily says educating.
Educating. Well, this is what I would do. If you're meeting with a donor and you're asking them for a right now real gift, and you're talking about, as we think about the need for these dollars right now and the importance of putting those dollars to work right now, as the executive director, I can't help but wonder, would our conversation today look different and sound different had we talked about planned giving and endowment giving 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Would our organization feel more secure and have more confidence in its sustainability and its rainy day or its crisis fund environment had we been talking about that then? So I'm talking about it now. So glad that you're committed and are part of Right Now, but I can't help but have Right Now get me thinking about what I wish I had done 10 years ago, and maybe we should start doing it tomorrow.
Mhm.
So that to me would be, that's a comfortable segue that I would use.
I think the honesty of that is important. And then also you got to start somewhere. I mean, if, like you said, if I'd have started 5 years ago, I'd be this far, but I had to start somewhere. I got to start. If I think that's something that's going to fit into our strategy of what we want to do.
Yeah, so the transparency of that, but again, did you see where it hopefully Emily and others, it ties into you still have to connect it to right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you start talking about that without tying it to right now, the person across from you is going to wonder, are you even around? Do you even know what's going on right now? So how does thinking about that have the desired impact right now?
Cool. That's good. That's really good.
Well,
Strong point is what Emily said. So she appreciated the response.
Well, you're most welcome. I wish I knew who everybody was.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of, otherwise we have the Hollywood squares on there with everybody can see everybody, and that's
Just fine. It's
yeah.
I love how involved everyone's been, even though we aren't having that. And honestly, I was on a call last Wednesday, and it was Hollywood squares. I love that visual. And the presenter was presenting, and someone wasn't muted. And I think she was like talking to her colleague about ordering lunch. So we all know what she had for lunch, because there she was, and she just didn't know. And it's like, oh my gosh, but we're just so human, and you just got to take that all in and enjoy it. And that's maybe even like if there was a final point, or, if there aren't other questions, try not to feel like you have to get it perfect. Try not to put so much pressure on yourself that you are one piece of all of the pieces.
Exactly. Well, that's good. That's good. I don't see any more questions, and we're at 1.
Oh my God. Well, Sean, I have to thank you. I have to thank Dave. You talk about like, how do you really take a long-term relationship that was focused on what Woltman does and what I needed, and being able to take it in this new kind of way. It's really special. And so I hope that your clients recognize that and are able to just see the value that you bring beyond just that expertise that we think of right away. And I like talking about fundraising, so I enjoyed the hour very much. Thank you.
No, this is very valuable. Cindy and I talked about this before. Our firm likes to connect people, our clients, with, so this is what Cindy's talking to you about today. That's not our expertise area for sure. We have some ideas, but nothing, we have near the experience, and we're not going to be able to do the level of work that she can do. So, and that's a lot of skill there. So we try to connect our clients with those kind of relationships for things. I can't do that, but I know somebody, and we're really good at knowing other talented individuals and companies that can do certain things. So I think this was a chance for us to present that to our clients, non-clients. We don't really care. We just want to help. This was a way we thought, how can we help our nonprofit relationships that we have? And this was a way to do that. So I think it was good. We had some good responses, good interaction. So I just appreciate your time, Cindy. Thank you for taking the time to do
It was a
this.
great hour.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
There is, just want to remind you, there is a very brief 3-question survey that we'd love to hear from you, because we do plan on doing more of these. So we would like to hear from you so that we can know if there's a question you didn't ask, or if there's some topic you'd like to have covered. We would just love to hear from you on that. So please take just a minute or so to fill that out. And also, if you have, Cindy had left her information, if you need help with anything she talked about today, she'd be a good resource to reach out to. And then if you need something else, let us know. So appreciate everyone's time. Glad you could make it. We'll see you later.